Our Facebook Live. I'm Georgia McDonald, I'm the General Manager here at the Wade Institute, and this is Kwang Hui Lim, and he's one of our faculty here. So tonight we're talking about the Master of Entrepreneurship, and we're talking about in particular the practical component of the program, so the actual building of the business. So in general, when we talk about the University of Melbourne's Master of Entrepreneurship, we're talking about the three key things that you get out of being a part of a program like this. Number one is the really rigorous academic learning. This is a Melbourne University Masters degree, and we want you to have mastery over all kinds of business models and all kinds of human resources and business acumen. We also talk about the second component is the really practical bit, so the building of a startup, and then the third part is the network and the connections, and that includes your cohort and the faculty and mentors, and then the entrepreneurs and investors and people that come into the program. So Kwang has been one of our leading faculty since day one with the Master of Entrepreneurship, and I've had the great joy to work with him for the last 2 years. So Kwang, can you, I'm going to ask you to talk a bit about yourself in a minute and your background, but first, just to set the scene, can you talk about how we embed that really practical component throughout the Master of Entrepreneurship and how that kind of works with the more theoretical subjects?
Would be a pleasure. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Georgia, for having me here. It's really exciting to be on Facebook Live. Yeah. So Georgia mentioned the three components, and the way we weave the practical in is that we have the students participate in actual hands-on projects.
Yeah.
And so throughout the year, they're involved in building a new business, starting in the first half with what we call a garage project and various other opportunities that they have to start exploring ideas.
Yeah.
So if you think about the year being, first half and the second half, that first half is very exploratory. They're trying to see who they are and the kinds of problems they're trying to solve and the kinds of other people they want to work with. And the garage project is one of the ways in which they can use it as a platform to explore those kinds of issues. In the middle, during the winter break, sort of last week in the cold, they huddled together in the room next door with my colleague Greg.
Yeah.
And he spent a week in an intensive with them to try to gel together the kind of theory and concepts that they would then be able to make sense of in trying to propose an idea. That would then become the project they would pursue in the second half. And in the second half of the year, they take my course, which is Create Your Own Enterprise Part 2, long name. But what it is we spend 12 weeks with them starting to build hypotheses and then going out to test those hypotheses, and in some instances, building actual companies, so that by the time they're through, they have a rigorously thought out idea that would have been tested somewhat, and some action in the marketplace from that. So we see it as a progression that fills the whole year. Jody, my colleague who teaches the garage project in the first half, giving them exploratory opportunities. Greg in the middle, trying to help them start to put some structure around it, and me having them go out to test and build in the second half.
And so we should mention that we wanted, Jody was meant to be with us here tonight, but her youngest daughter was sick and she's had to go to the hospital, and so we hope her little girl gets better really soon, and so it's just me and Kwang doing a double act tonight. So one of the things that people often ask is, like when they're doing Create Your Own Enterprise with you, these aren't project businesses, are they? This is the real deal.
It's the real deal.
Yeah.
So we're trying to kill two birds with one stone. On the one hand, there are academic deliverables, and in a 12-week course that is Create Your Own Enterprise, in week 4 they have to do an assessment, in week 8 and in week 12, and each of these is designed to help push them along in their development of the project. But sort of the alternate universe that they live in is the one where they're out of the building, engaging with potential customers, trying to build their businesses, very practical support and mentoring from our faculty, including I think a few of them who you might mention, like Ishani and Marcus.
That's right.
And so the students then get the hands-on experience of actually building stuff.
Yeah.
By the end of it, they also do a very practical thing, which is to pitch their ideas.
Yeah.
We do an initial pitch in class, and during that time they get feedback from industry participants.
Yeah.
And then we, at the end of it all, we have like a showcase when a number of the projects are presented in front of a live audience in this very room.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So what Kwang was just mentioning there was some of the mentoring team who we work really closely with here. The model, when it's a really practical subject like this, is that there are some core theoretical frameworks and concepts that Kwang is teaching, and then he has a very practical workshop sort of based class where you're actually proposing hypotheses, you're testing them. Kwang's going to be grilling you the next week on, well, what were the answers, not just what you'd like to think, but what did the customer actually say, what have you discovered? And you're supported through that process by the mentoring piece, which happens, so Kwang's class is usually on a Wednesday, and then we have mentors come in on a Thursday. And so the mentors are there to help reinforce the frameworks that Kwang is teaching, and also just to deal with some of the sticky stuff that comes out when you're actually trying to build a business.
Yeah, it's real life. So
Yeah.
what happens in class provides a backbone for activity, but everyone's project is different, and last year we had almost a dozen, I think. Yeah. So they're all unfolding at different rates, and that's where the mentors help, sort of smooth out the differences in terms of rate, but also in terms of the knowledge. Like some of them may need knowledge from whatever week 8 that in practice they need in week 2, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I see that as an opportunity for reinforcing that sort of feedback between what they learn in a more formal academic setting and the very unpredictable and very messy real life projects that they build.
The fun stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the basis of Create Your Own Enterprise, and kind of the way that we think about the structure of the practical component of the Master of Entrepreneurship. I think we'd all be really interested to hear more about you and how you came to be here and your experience, because you're not just an academic, and you're not just doing your consulting work. Sometimes people call these pracademics, so you've got sort of the industry experience and the academic experience. But can you tell us a bit about you and your background and some of the stuff you do?
So I'll try not to bore you
We've
with
only
the
got
5-hour version.
20 more minutes.
Okay. So let me rewind quickly. I grew up in Singapore. I was born in Malaysia. I grew up in Singapore. Did my doctoral studies in the US at the MIT Sloan School, which is very entrepreneurial. Yeah. And I worked for about 6 years in Singapore. So my wife and I have been here for about 11 years. I can't believe it, but yeah, it's been since 2006. And I initially, when I first arrived in Australia, entrepreneurship was not quite taking off yet. So much of my earlier work was in strategic management. So that's one of the things I teach at the Melbourne Business School and continue to engage in that space. It's almost by accident that I ended up there, because most of my earlier work was on innovation, entrepreneurship, and knowledge. Yeah. But because I ended up teaching strategic management, it's given me an opportunity to bring some of that learning into the way and to give the entrepreneurship students sort of a taste of what it's like to think strategically about market entry, or about competitors, or about how do you position yourself as you start to scale up your business. That's sort of one of the things. So one of the things I do, apart from teach the students at the Wade, is I'm an associate professor at the Melbourne Business School, where I teach strategy, I teach innovation, and we have a new thing that I launched last year with David Graydon from engineering. It's called Bio Design, and it's a 9-month course where business students and engineering students work with doctors and medical practitioners to develop new medical devices and try to bring them to market. So there are a number of these teams that I've coached in various other areas. I guess I also dabble in 1 or 2 other things. So I'm heavily involved with a group called the Intellectual Property Research Institute of Australia, and till recently I co-directed it with one of my colleagues in the law school. So you can see I collaborate with a lot of people across different parts of campus, and I think that also is a very important perspective to have as an entrepreneur, an entrepreneur is someone who tries to bring together resources across different boundaries to build something new. And I hope I bring a little bit of that to the students as well, that they don't just see themselves as trying to do a project, sitting down in these four walls and only engaging with themselves, but that they try to, you know, draw upon resources from other parts of university, but also other people in Melbourne and around the world. And I think this year we had an interesting new partnership. I think you're going to probably mention it.
Well, I think we can link this in the kind of how important cross-collaboration is in entrepreneurship with a question that we often get asked, which is, do I need to have an idea before I start Garage Project or create your own enterprise? So maybe now's a good time to kind of link that together.
My view is you don't need to have a specific idea that you want to explore prior to doing a course like this. In some ways it might even inhibit your growth. I think what you really want is to have a real and genuine care about a kind of problem or a kind of community for whom you want to solve their problems. So for example, we've had students who've had a very strong need to help improve women's lives or to make babies have better prams, or we've had a whole variety of students who've come in who have had a passion to do something for particular people. I think that's what you need. The specific idea you explore in some sense doesn't really matter, because as you build an entrepreneurial firm, that will evolve, that will change, and it will unfold as you figure things out and as you try to validate things. So I worry less about coming in with a specific idea than about caring about a particular thing or having experiences and deep experiences with particular communities, so you really understand their needs and you can empathize with them and you really want to solve their problems.
And so we talked about Garage Project as being a time, a really exploratory kind of time, to be thinking about what kinds of problems you want to be looking at. You understand a bit more about yourself and your skill set and what you want to spend your time doing, and you also getting to know your cohort and the wider ecosystem, who you want to work with and what other ideas are out there. And this year we've got a really great relationship with the people at TRAN, which stands for Translating Research at Melbourne. So they're a group that's part of University of Melbourne that takes teams of researchers who have an idea that has a commercial opportunity, and to be able to take that through a kind of incubation process to see if, okay, does this project have legs? Is there something in it? And so this year, a bunch of our students are partnering up with those kinds of ideas. How do you think that helps, the people coming into the Wade Institute, and how do they reach out and make those kinds of connections?
Right. So I think there are the two levels on which the magic happens. The formal level is people like Georgia organizing joint events, or people like Vesta who works here and who'll be organizing.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
We're on Facebook, looking at Facebook.
We're getting being John Malkovich. Sorry. Okay.
We are being John Malkovich. So I think there's the formal level, which is about fostering that interaction. So you and I have good personal relationships with Simon and Lauren, who are at TRAM and running that program, and we try to coordinate on activities, including, I was mentioning, there's a mixer coming up in a week or two right here, and people that are interested are welcome to join in, meet the entrepreneurial community, but also get to know what other projects are happening in the TRAM portfolio. So I think at that level, we've started to develop some infrastructure, so to speak, human infrastructure that allows collisions to occur between our students and students that are in other parts, as well as faculty and alumni and others. I think the more important one, though, is sort of the informal, and and this I think can only come across when you meet some of the Wade students and the passion that they show, including some of these years, who they so wanted to bring some new idea to market or meet people who are like-minded in having problem they needed to solve, and a burning desire to bring a solution. Often the people that do things like TRAM and other programs, they have a rich experience in the technical side, but they don't always have the depth of experience in the entrepreneurial nor the management side of things. So I think this is where seeing some of our students who have that passion and that sort of taking that initiative to go, cold call them or go meet them for coffees and meet and interact. That's, I think, where the real action takes place. Because to be honest, at a formal event, there's so many people. You get to swap name cards and you kind of get to meet each other. But it's only when you really sit down and engage that you really see if there's a meeting of minds and a meeting of interests.
It really is that kind of relationship building.
It's very much so.
And that happens on a personal kind of one-to-one level. And you've got to get out there, and it's not just one meeting or one networking event or something like that. It's just building it up over time and building those connections. Something else that we're doing for the next 4 months, and we'll be doing next year as well, is a series of events called WadeX New Ideas Forum. And so we know that sometimes we've got really passionate entrepreneurs who are coming into the program or who are in the kind of ecosystem, and helping them to find the kinds of problems to solve that are of a high value and that are juicy enough and meaty enough to bring into a program like this, but actually just to be working with. And so we've got a series of events, and Vesta will chuck the link up on Facebook over the next 4 months. So working with our corporate partners, Australia Post, Cause Chambers Westgarth, Credit Suisse and MyOb, and using some of their insider knowledge as well as combining it with academic researchers and entrepreneurs who will on each night give you, there'll be 3 10-minute sort of TED Talks on, if I was an entrepreneur, this is the space I'd be looking at. These is the kind of research I've done into Internet of Things or into AgTech or whatever it is. These are the insights that I've had around the kind of opportunities that might be opening up. And it is really important as an entrepreneur to not get too stuck in your one idea, but to be ready to have your mind broadened.
I think this is where perhaps one of the benefits of being in a program like the WADE or being at Melbourne Uni is about that richness of experience. And I often tell students this sort of analogous to when you learn how to play a musical instrument. You don't just learn your scales and your genre. You want exposure to many different types of music, different musicians and their styles, and as you start to learn about these different ones around you, then you start to find a fit for yourself. But you also learn how to play with them. Sort of you bring your trombone, I bring my whatever, and that's how opportunities bubble into reality. And so I think it's exactly the kinds of things like WadeX that will give people that opportunity to bridge ideas and broker ideas across different spaces. So that will materialize in new opportunities that no one sitting at home thinking only about their idea is going to come up with, because it's in those people bumping into each other and arguing about whether their idea makes sense or not. That's when you start to crystallize new opportunity.
Absolutely. So one thing, we've got about 10 minutes only left, and one thing that I'd love to hear about, people who are coming in to do the Master of Entrepreneurship are looking for practical outcomes. So it might be building a business, but it might also be working in innovation consulting, or it might be working in a corporate but being in a spin-off or whatever it is. So can you talk about some of your students from last year and what did they do with you, and where are they now, and that kind of
would be a pleasure. So those of you who are online, you may want to roll back to somewhere on this Facebook page. I think there is a link to last year's final pitch night, and I think you can watch some of the pitches there. That's fantastic. We've had an amazing first cohort last year, and most of them have continued to go out and do interesting things. So a couple of them, Eleanor and Sarah, they are working in a startup called Mimic Tech, and they're trying to bring biomimicry technology to helping farmers. And after they completed the wait, they continue work on several prototypes, and recently they joined the Melbourne Accelerator, so they're part of the Melbourne Accelerator. They're one of the 10 teams that into it. So that's one path forwards after doing something like the Masters of Entrepreneurship.
And that idea started in the first week of create your own enterprise this time last year.
Not just that, they had live chicks in this room running around as they were validating the ideas. So that was fun. But that's not the only path. There are others that are trying to organically grow their own businesses. So the other Sarah Gola, others, young parents, to get some time for themselves by providing services to fill in the gaps at home. And they're continuing to build a business. I caught up with them recently, and they're doing pretty well. They're having difficulty trying to serve demand, which is always a good sign.
That's a good problem.
That's a good problem to have. So, wish them well, but that's another path, is to just continue growing that business organically until it
that's what people call bootstrapping.
Bootstrapping,
So
exactly.
instead of looking for investment or going into an accelerator and getting some investment, just trying to generate enough revenue week by week to grow a little bit more every week.
And they have paying customers, right? So I think if they scale up sufficiently on the paying customers, they can reinvest that and build the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which reminds me, speaking of paying customers, of Jamal, who was one of our really interesting, I love this guy, he's such an interesting character. But he was one of our students from last year, and he's continuing to be an entrepreneur and develop his business. But during the wait, he came in with an idea of cosmetics for dark-skinned people, and I'll always remember this. He came in with a clear idea of the kind of problem he wanted to solve, but the solution he had was to sell it person by person to each customer. And as he went through and validated this idea, he started to realize he could start to serve salons and go business to business. And this has given him an opportunity to kind of reorientate his business. So over time, this will then end up being much more growable. But also he'll have these salon owners as stakeholders who will help him do the marketing and all that, right?
And so this is
another path.
Yeah, and there's lots of jargon in the startup world, and this is what people call pivoting. And sometimes we use all this kind of jargon, and people are like, "What does that even mean?" But that's what a pivot is. That you've gone out, you've had direct insights, and you've changed the way that you do business, and that's what's so important about CYOE.
Perhaps you should mention a couple of other students who I think also took different paths afterwards. So Rosie and Susie were in another team, and they started my course last year with a problem to solve, which was that owners of small businesses don't get much time to go on holiday or take some time off. So they started exploring the idea of having an sort of a platform to allow other people to fill in and allow people to take a break.
And what was the kind of response they were getting?
No one believed that was any. People thought this was a totally crazy idea.
No one's going to let someone come in and take over
that's the
business.
Thing. You think. No. So the amazing thing was, after 5 weeks, they came back with actual market data showing no, people actually are willing to do this. We couldn't believe it.
I remember this class presentation because we're all sitting around. Everyone had spent 4 weeks just going, no one's going to want to give that over. I'm not leaving my B&B to some person to mine.
Some random person.
Yeah, and then they got up with this killer PowerPoint, and it says we've spoken to X number of and they just.
And that was super persuasive. So by the end, I bought this. I bought it. I would have put money into that one. It goes to show that the faculty and the mentors, we've seen a lot of cases and examples, but by no means are we all knowing, all seeing.
Well, and I think also it goes to show we're teaching frameworks and systems. We're here to bounce ideas. We're here to workshop with you, but you're the entrepreneur. You're the one that needs to go out and prove this.
Exactly.
And that's always going to be your job, and we're happy to be proved.
We're happy to be proven wrong, provided you do the test right. We trust the method.
Exactly.
If you follow the method and you come out with a result that is surprising, that's learning for me.
Yeah. It's cool. That's really cool. So I'm going to finish probably with just one more question for you. And it's an existential question.
Oh dear.
What do you love about this job?
What do I love about this job? That's a hard one because I'm starting with a new cohort next week.
Next week?
Terrifying.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday. I think what I love most is watching them grow. Watching them, almost always the first half is chaos, right? People are going through a struggle of trying to figure out who they are, what they want to do, do they really like the other people around them? And usually I think during the first half, as they work through their garage project or whatever initial thing they're doing, they're sort of doing it without any of the tools, right? Because they're gradually learning these things in the other courses. In the second half, I think we have an opportunity to start to see these things start to come together. In some teams a little faster, in some teams like more towards week 12. But in most cases, it does come together. I think the reason it comes together is because something like this course, they're not just learning from us or their project, they're learning by watching each other. And when they see others make progress in a particular way, they're like, I've got to go try that. And so there's sort of you kind of see suffering, and then like a sudden acceleration. And it's very gratifying for me to see people grow like that. It's just amazing to see. If I think back to last year's cohort, where they've gone for sure, but clearly where they'd reached after just 12 weeks versus where they were at 6-12 months ago. It was just amazing to watch. So for me, I think that's the existential part for me. Is like, what makes me happy when I teach this class? It is that.
That's really cool, and it really, I think that shows in all of your work. Kwang is seriously just an amazing faculty here. But you are, and your students really appreciate it. Kwang has thousands of followers on his Facebook page. He's always got all these ex-students who come out, I love him so much.
Well, they're there to enjoy the photography, so my
through.
wife and I do some photography, so they're not really there for Kwang.
I think they are. I know they are. Kwang, thanks for coming and doing this Facebook Live with us. If you want to come along to WadeX, you can see the links on the Facebook page. If you want to get in touch with us and learn about any of the other events or what's happening, shoot us an email at inquiries@wadeinstitute.org.au. And we hope to see you soon. Cool. Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.